What's going on? This is King Cam Ujumbe podcast and Ujumbe Meets Message. And today's message is a book review. It's entitled Under Their Own Vine and Fig Tree by William E. Montgomery. The book deals with the African American church in the South between the years of 1865 and 1900. William E. Montgomery, who first published this work in 1993 by the Louisiana State University Press, was an instructor of history in Austin at the Austin Community College in Austin, Texas. He was a Fulbright professor in the University of Lesotho between the years of 1989 and 1990. The title, Under Their Own Vine and Fig Tree, derived from the biblical text, Micah, the Old Testament text, Micah chapter 4, verses 4. But they shall sit, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. For the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken. Now, in this work, it displays the growth and development of the African American church in the antebellum South. The reader purchased this hardback through Amazon.com, and it consists of 358 pages with a table of contents, illustrations, epilogue, and index. The book covers 7 chapters and deals with the superficial as well as subconscious activities and thoughts of the African Americans as well as the church during this time frame. Keep in mind, this is right after the Civil War during the Reconstruction period. In the review, I will give a brief analysis of the book. And according to Montgomery, the story does not start in the South, but in West Africa. We'll talk about that. Montgomery also points out the religious similarities between Christianity and West African tradition. I will briefly discuss the impact of this event and how it touched the Black community in the North and in the South. Now, according to the author, a lot of Africans in America were influenced by white theologians during this time, and some Black. They were, in the ones in the North, the northern parts were more reserved and had a very conservative view to worship. According to Montgomery, most of whom is part of the Methodist and Lutheran faith because of the structure and style. In some areas of segregation in the North, still the norm, and the freedmen, those who were free, had to worship in balconies and even outside. This would eventually cause tension between Blacks and whites. So later on, people like Amos Hall and Richard Allen would branch off and find and establish the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Conversely, the AME is still most prominent in the northern regions of the United States. Now, the southern states, however, which spanned from the docks of Virginia to Galveston, Texas, was in direct contact with Africans that came from the slave ships, so their worship experience would be very different. Now, of course, most of the enslaved could not worship the way they felt to do so, but through their own customs and traditions. You had the Yoruba, you had the people of the Congo, you had the people of Togo, so they couldn't worship the way that they wanted to. So for a while, they had to worship in the way that their masters, in the style that their masters worshiped. This over time was not acceptable to the Africans in the South. So they would go out into the woods and establish a praise house. Praise house was only one room. It was a one-room house in which the Africans would go to worship God in their own way. This was during the time when the West African culture and customs and nuances would come out. A lot of the rhythmic dances, chants, and songs and claps that was once an African part of African folklore and folk heritage was then converted into Baptist hymns. From the missionary standpoint, according to Montgomery, it was made by the missionaries, those who went throughout the South. They made contributions to the theologians of the North, both Black and white. So you had missionaries, black and white, going to the South, trying to corral this behavior. However, the result varied depending on the minister's ethnicity, background, and church denomination. Most Africans in the South prefer their own to preach the gospel to them. However, the resources were scarce, and most of the time, white preachers would come. They would go from plantation to plantation. Some giving giving the right message and encouragement and hope, while others would give sermons such as "Slaves, be obedient to your master." They being the more conservative type, did not understand the emotion and jubilations of the Africans whose roots were that of Africa. They would then mock the black preachers for shunning them as to think that they lacked the knowledge and understanding of the Holy Writ, the Holy Book. Now, as mentioned before, the results varied. Some slave states were more receptive to the Methodist doctrine, while others received the Baptist with vigor. And even more still, there are those who held fast to the Pentecostal experience. Now, the Baptists in the South, according to Montgomery, was popular because of the West African belief of water immersion in order to cleanse all unrighteousness. Water was a focal point and a conduit between the spirit and the spirit realm and the physical.